I want to welcome everybody. Um, we're going to talk a little bit today about, and we promised to talk about, it's pretty ambitious, right? How to achieve a data-driven response to COVID-19. Well, there are steps along the way. There was an article written in Minds, Monica Oss pointed out how important it is these days in the context of the pandemic to learn to become reactionary in a sense. Everything is changing in our environment. How can we look at our data in some meaningful way that tells us what's important, what's not important, where are we doing well, what's getting in our way? And we've had some success with this. Doug mentioned the customer in Ohio. That's a good example because we had the opportunity to follow along through time, right? We were in the middle of collaborating. And as we were earlier focused on budgeting, right? This is financial perspective, looking at financial and clinical. And so we were building tools that allowed us to look at budgets. And but we also took a view that went a little deeper in terms of just gathering last year's numbers of units and trying to develop a better understanding of how we produced that many units and why did it go up and why did it go down. And through the course of that, it turns out those tools that we used for that came in really handy when our whole world had to change, and suddenly everything was about this week and next week. So we wanted to talk a little bit about, sort of how we got there from here. I'll mention one of the themes behind all the work we're doing these days with financial is the idea of giving the financial folks a way to get a foothold on where their revenue stream is coming from, right? So we know that we know what financial people are doing over there, what they're worried about, and so, for example, uh, they'll be looking at budgets, right, versus revenue and expenses. And of course, they're dealing with vendors and they need to pay their bills and our staff, right? So, in this context, um, we're looking in the general ledger and we have certain tools in there for reporting, right? But if we have a certain budget and we have a certain actual and the actual has a shortfall, we now have limited power to look back over here and understand why did that just happen. Of course, we can go ask the folks, right? And the folks over here, they work in a different world as well, right? They're worried about, scheduling appointments, keeping appointments, making them productive, and all these things we measure over here. It's a different language. And the programs that we talk about on this side, oftentimes, most often, are not the same things. They're cost centers, right? We have programs in the EHR that are rolled up into cost centers, and so on and so forth. So there's a language barrier, and in order to address that, we started looking into how can we integrate these two sides of the house, right? And we've been building lots of analytics around clinical stuff at providers' request. So we learned a little bit about that. And we built some revenue kind of stuff on the financial side, like cost accounting and things like that. But the first trick in here that kind of is backdrop for everything we're going to talk about today is getting your revenue out of the EHR. So if we want to build a common language between these two sides of the house, we probably got to take a little different view. This is the traditional view, right? Clinical people look at these things. Well, how much does that impact our revenue? Well, it's kind of indirectly related. There's no direct connection between productivity. You may have more no-shows, but that might not be even significant in terms of revenue. So we want to take a different view and look at life cycle and look at revenue generation, right? And the steps along the way. So we have steps along the way here. We have, we have to schedule an appointment. So we're over here. And then we're gonna, have it whether or not the consumer attends. We could lose some efficiency there. We could have some non-billable work we're doing. We lose some more efficiency there. We could not bill the services and so on. So where all these inefficiencies come from? Steps in the life cycle. And down here on the right, you can see kind of every possible one. But which ones matter? And so the idea here is to just integrate these different life cycle phases in terms of common measures instead of maybe measuring numbers and no-shows, maybe if we measure in hours, so we can connect that back up to our appointment hours, which connects back up to our staff hours, which is our fundamentally drives our cost. On the other side, we have dollars. So we want to, unify these units that we're measuring and take a wholly different view that's just completely revenue based. And that gives us lots of tools to look at where revenue is going up and down and why, which is typically not something we dig into too much because it's so darn complicated. But with this, you can see we can look at how much revenue do we get per billable hour versus how much we get per kept hour. The delta there has to do with kept appointments that are not billable and other factors in terms of billing. So that difference, right, is the gap of how much we're losing at each step. And we can take that gap and multiply it times how many appointments and tell us a little bit about where the revenue opportunity are. It's opportunity cost, right? So we can look at the idea 80 staff in outpatient. We could be looking at 6 or 7 different dashboards for different stages of the life cycle across 80 staff. We'd have to be a genius to conclude anything from there. But with this, here's one angle. It's not the only angle. But one angle could be where's the opportunity cost the greatest? And out of this I can carve out 4 staff that have significant, whether or not it's, classically in terms of waste or just opportunity. So we could maybe take action on that. We're going to lead into the theme of taking action. One way to use data to take action is to find out what's important.